Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Kizer Knives Comet. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Paul Munko, the designer, who sent this my way. He's been a fan of the channel for a while, and I've looked at some of his stuff previously, and he reached out to me, said, "Hey, Nick, my first design's coming out. You want to take a look?" I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm always interested in good budget gear, and this is, good budget gear. But I told him, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk, and he still did send it along. We do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, size comparison. This guy is not particularly large as I hit my arm on the table for some reason. Nice. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, and so what we're going to see here is in terms of sharpened blade length, it's got a little bit of edge on the Delica here, but the generally speaking, very equivalent in terms of blade length. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2, and what we're going to see here is almost equivalent in terms of sharpened blade length and in terms of overall size. It's not a particularly large knife. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2, which at the moment is wearing a fancy pair of pants, but nonetheless, this is a Spyderco PM2, and we see this is not a particularly large knife right here. And then finally, I'll put it up against one of Paul's other pieces, and mostly for comparison. This right here is the Benchmade Bug-Out, Spaced-Out Bug-Out Edition, which is a Paul Munko design. This was a collaboration that Paul did with Northern Knives and under his other brand, which is ColorfulFilth, which, okay, neat. So that's who Paul is, right? This is Munko Knives, Paul Munko, and he's been known as ColorfulFilth in the community. He's also Munko Knives, etc. And like I said, I was very interested to see what would come out of his mind in terms of knife design, if this is what comes out of his mind in terms of art. So that's who this guy is, and that's where you've heard the name before. So there you go. And then finally, on the I just want to let folks know, this is a more budget-focused knife. At the time of review, this is running from $85 to $90, depending on the specifications, and that's a beautiful thing. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. So on the good side, to start with, this guy has a very nice action, right? I can put this guy, no wrist at all, boom, deploy, easy peasy. This has a great detent. It is really well dialed in. It is 100% reliable. This is a very, very solid detent. I like it a lot. No problems there. So the action on this guy is good. Next thing, this guy has wonderful lock bar access. This little region right here, this cutout, gives you a bunch of access down to this liner, which makes it very easy to press the liner down, let the knife close, as so. Beautiful thing. So that's good. Next thing, and generally speaking, the closing ergonomics are quite good too, with the little peak at the top here. This is just very easy to close because that action is quite nice. So that's good. Next thing, the micarta here is, it's actually really well done, right? And part of the reason I say that is that the micarta and the brass here, these bolsters, actually the bolster continues under the micarta for a little bit, so this screw is holding down both the bolster and the micarta, which is very, very nice, although there's another screw obviously holding on to the micarta there. But that's just a really nice design, and it keeps him from having to have yet another screw right here to avoid the bolster rotating out that way. It's a clever little thing, right? It's not a huge deal, but it is absolutely a deal, and if you watch this assembly, you'd get a better sense of what's going on there. Next thing, blade-wise, this is a knife in 154 cm, which is a solid budget steel, right? Says right there, 154 cm. 154 cm, you can see, got a little gunk on there, but 154 cm is one of them steels that is absolutely, it's fine for daily life. Yeah, you're going to end up sharpening a little bit more than some other steels out there, but you know what? It works. It's good to go. I'm happy enough with 154 cm at a kind of a budgety price point, and I think that is what this is at, which is my final bit of good, which is that this is a very solid price point, right? For 154 cm, for a reasonable micarta, maybe not the best micarta ever, it's very much on the very fabric-y side of things, and then some interesting metal here. You know what? For $85, I'm okay with that, right? It's not the same level of budget-tude. I don't even know how to say that word, but either way, it's not the same level of budget as we used to see yesteryear, so to speak, but this still feels pretty solid for the price, and for a lot of people, $85 is going to be within the realm of like, oh, that looks really cool, I'll save up for that, and that's great. I really appreciate that it's coming in at a lower price, especially when so many designer collabs are very expensive right now. So, to me, all of that is the good, is that it's got a solid price, a nice blade, brilliant bolster and micarta layout, a great lock bar access, and a great action. For me, though, the great part about this knife is 100% the design. This is a knife that has a lot of style, right? And I say that in a number of different ways, right? And especially, I gotta say, this is more so relevant than ever because we live in the era right now of forgettable and expensive knives. But this is not necessarily that same kind of thing, right? Because we have a very nice kind of clip point approach to it, although it's not maybe a classical clip point, which is cool. We got a nice swooping grind here. We got a nice set of bolsters on here, and in a cool metal, that is. Neat material. Got some fun micarta. We got the pivot collar in here, the micarta pivot collar, which is a little bit of an extra mile. Let's just be real here, and that's happening on both sides. The whole thing is absolutely cool. It's just a nice design. It's a little different. It's a little unique. It sticks out a little bit more, that is, than a lot of the budget stuff out there, and that's absolutely great. And so to me, what's great about this guy is that it feels like it was done by a designer, and it feels like they were trying for an aesthetic, trying to be something different, and that's great, especially when there's so much same out there. So to me, that is the great. There's a lot of style here for the price. On the bad side, anytime you're dealing with a metal like, brass or bronze or anything like that, you are going to find yourself that GSD watch, by the way. Anyways, people are going to ask, might as well answer. But this is a place where you will patina. There is going to be patina in your life and on your knife. To be clear, I've also had this guy for a number of months now, and it hasn't patinaed that hard, right? I can kind of polish it up a little bit and show you what it looks like with that polish on there, and you're going to see, yeah, it's a little bit more polished, but it does definitely patina after a little while. So this is going to be a constant thing that you're either going to need to polish up regularly, or you're just going to need to accept that, hey, patina is a way of life, and, you'll have to be okay with that. See, before, after. There you go. So that is a thing you're going to want to consider, right? Whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, this guy is pocket pecking a little bit. It does have a flip-a-tapper. Wow, a pocket pecker flip-a-tapper. I guess that's a new word for you. It's got a nice flip-a-tapper hanging out the back side of there, tapping on whatever's in your pocket all day long with the flipper. That's not necessarily the end of the world, and this is reasonably rounded off, right? It's not a sharp sort of thing, but it definitely is sticking out of there, and that is a thing you're going to want to consider. Next thing on this guy, I don't understand this line right here. I don't generally go that kind of crazy. Well, no, I go that crazy all the time. Who the heck am I kidding? But anyways, there's this little kind of either a hump or a hole, depending on how you want to think about it, but it doesn't quite make sense to me why there's this and then this, right? That just feels like somebody messed up, right? I don't entirely get this little hump here. Either have it just be a part of the carve-out, which is itself great, or just have it be a consistent line. But that's the one part of this that just doesn't make any sense to me. Line-wise, like everything else seems to work, but that little hump is like, did they... What the heck? I don't get it. But whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, this is built like a budget knife. For instance, the micarta on here doesn't particularly, especially in places like here, doesn't really match up with the brass. Like, there are definitely areas where you run your finger along here and you feel that distinction very strongly, right? That's a very budget sort of thing. They also miss the sharpening choil. Not the end of the world, but it is a thing that you want to consider here. But it is very clear, taking this guy apart, that this is a budget-friendly knife because it's built like one. And so if you're looking for something that is, oh my god, crazy high-end, this probably won't satisfy you. But then again, it's $85, so... what do you want, right? Next thing, unfortunately, ergonomically speaking, this is one of those knives that has exactly one comfortable grip, right? If I grip it just like this, it's pretty damn good. But if I choke up at all, then the flip-a-tab starts kind of digging into my fingers right there. There's not really a way to choke up any further and get it closer to the blade. That's not really an option. If I grip a little bit further back, everything kind of falls apart. And so for me, there's kind of one way that this works well in the hand, and that's fine. But even in like a hammer grip, everything kind of falls apart a little bit with the clip digging in there. There's kind of one grip here. And that's not the end of the world, but it is sort of a thing relative to a lot of knives where you feel like you've got a lot more options there. And especially with this little hump here, right? Ergonomically, it's fine for my hands in one grip, but that generally means it's not amazing, right? Then finally, on the bad side, I don't like this clip. The clip on this guy, look, to be clear, it is actually technically an upgrade, if you want to think about it that way, relative to a more conventional sort of spring-style clip. This is the Artisan Arroyo here, and this is the kind of clip I might expect on a knife of this kind of budget, but the thing is, this clip doesn't really kind of match any of the other lines. It doesn't match any of the curves. It doesn't really make sense. In a lot of ways, it feels like they had a bunch of these left over at Kizer, and they just kind of slapped one on there, right? Maybe it is custom design, maybe, and it kind of does match the back thing, so maybe that's not entirely fair, but at the same time, I just don't care for it. And there are a couple of reasons for that, right? One thing I've noticed is that it not only scratches, you can see snail trails on there, but it also scratches other things, right? I've noticed, I keep a little glass screen protector thing on my phone, and this clip is more brutal than any other clip to that. That's weird evidence, right? Maybe I use bad screen protectors, but it is definitely a thing that I've noticed here more than I've noticed on any other pocket knife. And so that is kind of a thing that happens, but it just doesn't match. It doesn't go with anything else on the knife. And I kind of feel like this knife with a more polished clip that would match the polished liners, the polished flipper tab, the polished pivot, all of that, that would make a lot more sense, having something like this on here rather than a gray mass. Ergonomically speaking, yeah, you definitely need to be careful when you use kind of a bent spring clip like that, but especially if they could bring the price down a little bit more, if they could knock this clip off and, take $10 off it, that would be a big win. And so for me, the clip on this guy is the weakest part, and frankly, it's the most annoying part, especially the scratch it dude. That's an obvious thing that they could change to bring the price down a little bit further and, frankly, bring the quality of the knife a little bit up. It works fine as a clip. I want to be very clear about that. It stays in the pocket. It does what you need, but I think they could do a little bit better, and they could probably do a little bit better, a little bit cheaper. So, to me, all of that is the bad, is that I don't care for the clip on this guy. It has kind of one comfortable grip. The ergos are a little weird otherwise. It is built like a budget knife, which makes a lot of sense given that it's a budget knife. I don't get what this extra little thing is doing right here. It is pocket packing, and patina will be a part of your life. There's nothing particularly ugly here. The clip is fine enough that I wouldn't call it ugly, although I certainly don't care for it. But let's go into the final conclusion, which is that this is an interesting budget knife, right? Because it has a very, very nice action, which I really appreciate, with good lock bar access, really nice bolsters, and a nice construction more broadly in terms of thinking it through. It's still budget construction, but it's a budgety knife. It's got a nice blade, a solid price, and a lot of style at a more affordable price point. There will be patina. There's a bit of a pocket pecker. It's built like a budget knife. It's got one comfortable grip, and the clip is not really doing it for me, but honestly, it's pretty damn solid. I will say, I am disappointed that the budget world is drifting upwards, right? I have a playlist that is budget gear under $60, and that sure doesn't feel like a thing, right? And I feel like, though, for the bulk of the channel's history, this probably would have ended up being a $50 or $60 knife. And yeah, I know, inflation, I'm filming this in November of 2022. This just feels a little bit on the higher side. And so at this price, they had better be doing excellent quality control. They're kind of toward the top of what they can charge for this, and it had better be done right. But at the same time, fundamentally, yes, it's a little more expensive than a lot of your budget options, and the thing is, it's interesting still because of that. And the reason it is not because it's practically better than some of the stuff you can still get for $50 or $60, but, $80 still buys a lot of knife, but it's because it's more unique, and I would say a little bit more stylish than your average cookie-cutter budget knife. Right, this is a knife that I could name. You could hold one of these up to me, and I could be like, oh my God, that's cool, that's a Kizer Comet, right? And I could probably even identify the designer based on seeing some of the prototypes and such he's posted. This has a design, it has a style, as opposed to trying to differentiate the Kizer Spluffit from the Civivi Sprang, the CJRB Fabliblio, and the QSP Exemplion. Well, those aren't real things, but they could be tomorrow, right? Am I wrong? Which are all, by and large, the same damn knife. Right? This is not the same damn knife. This is not the same knife that's been released 50 times, already. It feels like it was made by a designer, by an artist, frankly, for the sake of style and for the sake of art, rather than being another knife-shaped object popped out by taking the average of the last 40 knife-shaped objects that somebody released. And to me, it's great that that Paul is trying to do something interesting on the budget end here. It's a pretty low bar at this point in 2022, but at the same time, that is absolutely a beautiful thing, and it's kind of where we're at under $100 in 2022. I also want to give a little bit of praise to the designer, to Paul here, for designing for a budget. Right? One of the things that he said to me that made me immediately interested in this is, I'm trying to keep the price down. And right now, that's not that common in the bespoke overseas made knife designer self-published thing. Although this is actually a Kizer mainline knife, so it's not quite the same thing. But right now the trend is, everybody and their mother is designing a $325 frame lock. Right? And, there's a limit to how many of those people can appreciate, and there's a limit to how many people have the ability to even buy a $325 knife right now, and that's asking a lot. And it's really nice that this is coming from an interesting designer with an interesting design at a price where I think it's going to be in range for a lot of folks. Right? Yes, I'd love to see a cheaper version with a deeper clip, or a different clip, and by the way, kind of a lazy lanyard hole, let's just be real here. Didn't need one to start. Anyway, but I digress. I would like to see a little bit more here. Maybe a different clip, maybe some different materials or approaches, and maybe something a little bit more arty in his future, right? He's got his foot in the door at Kizer. Maybe you can convince him to do some crazy stuff like this, right? I'm game for that. But I'm just happy that budget doesn't mean boring here. And unless great designers take on the task and say, you know what? Yeah, I want to design another knife, but I want to make one that is standing out in the world of really boring budget stuff. So final conclusion, interesting design, interesting designer, decent price, there's some improvement, but at the same time, it's mostly good, and this is honestly the most interesting budget knife on my table in a while. Maybe not the best value, maybe not the best overall sort of knife, but it is certainly the most interesting, and it's the most different and the most, unique. So if this is Paul's first knife, and he's considering continuing down this road of trying to design really interesting artistic pieces while still being in a price range that the average Joe can afford, well, by God, I cannot wait to see what's Comet down the road next. Okay, like and comment down below. Okay, hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.